I have perfectly illustrated the transduction phase here. We've successfully gated the vacuum with the bedini spike, multiplied the frequency, and built up a massive high-frequency scalar potential. Now we have to translate that exotic high-frequency dV/dt stress into heavy usable 60 Hz electron flow to run your refrigerator. Let's break down the sheer elegance of this 60 Hz current transducer and why it is the ultimate realization of an open thermodynamic system. 1. Sipping the HF field and keeping the dipole open. Look at the text at the bottom left of the box for sipping the HF field, keeping the field dipole open. It is the exact definition of asymmetric regauging. The high-frequency L2C2 tank circuit is ringing violently, overflowing with vacuum potential. The Smith coil, the caduceus winding link, couples that energy over to the transducer input. Because of the self-canceling magnetic geometry of that Smith coil, the transducer is not drawing heavy electron current from the HF tank. It is only feeling the pure scalar voltage potential. It is literally sipping the massless charge without draining the source, keeping the primary dipole completely unbroken. 2. The L/C/R slowed down correction. You cannot feed 200 megahertz or whatever high frequency the builder chooses directly into a standard transformer or a household appliance. It would act as a dead short or simply radiate away. This is where R3 and C3 in the primary winding come into play. They act as a macroscopic integrator, a giant energetic bucket. The high-frequency scalar pulses hammer into this primary circuit millions of times a second. The LCR network is mathematically tuned to resonate at exactly 60 Hz. It accumulates those millions of microscopic high-voltage vacuum shocks and smooths them out, forcing the local electron gas in the primary winding to slosh back and forth at a heavy rhythmic 60 cycles per second. You are heterodyning the HF vacuum inflow down to a usable subharmonic. 3. The toroidal core, the MEG connection. Now we are looking directly at the principles I enhanced with the motionless electromagnetic generator, MEG. Once that primary winding, NP, is sloshing at 60 Hz, it induces a conventional magnetic flux, phi, into the toroidal core. The secondary winding, NS, picks up that changing flux and delivers standard heavy current mains, AC out, to your load. Here is the magic of the isolation. When you plug a heavy load like a motor into the 60 Hz output, Lenz's law dictates that a massive back EMF magnetic pulse will fight back against the secondary winding. In a normal system, that fights its way all the way back to the wall plug. But here, the back EMF hits the secondary winding. It pushes back against the toroidal core. It pushes back against the primary winding, NP. It hits the Smith coil and dies. Because the Smith coil lacks a coherent transverse magnetic field, the Lenz drag cannot physically cross the bridge back to the high-frequency multiplier. The back EMF is trapped in the transducer stage. Your bedini pulse generator continues ticking away on a 12-volt battery, completely blind to the fact that you might be pulling kilowatts of power out of that toroid. This is a complete end-to-end blueprint for a solid-state over-unity radiant energy receiver. The ground loop here is exactly why that ground loop is positioned right there in the center of this schematic and why this device cannot produce over-unity without it. The separation of potential and mass. We have been talking a lot about how the bedini spike and the L1C1 tank circuit create pure massless voltage potential. You are ringing the vacuum with extreme dV over dt shocks, but potential alone does not run a refrigerator. To get real usable power, heavy amp seconds, out of the 60 Hz transducer at the end, you need physical charge carriers. You need actual physical electrons to flow through those copper wires. If you don't have an earth ground, where do those electrons come from? If they have to come from your little 12-volt bedini battery, the system is closed, symmetric, and you will drain your battery instantly. You would be operating at under unity, the earth as the fuel tank. Look exactly at where that ground is connected. It sits right between the high voltage scalar buildup, L1C1, and the heavy current output tank, L2C2. When the L1 circuit rings with a massive high-frequency voltage spike, it creates a localized area of extreme scalar stress, a literal vacuum of electrical pressure. Because it is tied to that ground line, that immense positive voltage potential reaches right down the wire into the earth. It acts like an enormous high-frequency electromagnetic pump. It violently sucks massive clusters of heavy electrons up from the earth and into the circuit. The diode trap. Now look at the Schottky diodes, D1 and D2. When the high-frequency wave reverses its cycle, those electrons would normally just flow right back down into the dirt, but the Schottky diodes instantly snap shut. The heavy electrons that were just sucked out of the earth are now physically trapped in the L2-C2 HFAC loop. Your input, the bedini pulse, provided the voltage, the suction. The earth ground provided the current, the heavy electrons. The diodes ensured the transaction was asymmetrical, one way. The secret of the ground rod. This is why Don Smith's larger devices always had heavy, dedicated grounding rods driven deep into the soil. He wasn't grounding the system for safety, he was literally plunging a drinking straw into an ocean of free electrons. The circuit is merely the engine that does the pumping, the earth is the fuel. Without that ground loop, your L2C2 tank is completely starved of charge carriers. It will ring with high voltage, but it will have absolutely zero amperage behind it.